Welcome to Seth University presents the Covid Chronicles. My name is Seth. During the pandemic, I moved across the country back home to Memphis, Tennessee. Since I've been home, I continued my interest in researching Black queer folks and how we create space. Specifically, I'm interested in how we recreated sexual spaces during the pandemic. For example, I've been studying Martin Luther King Jr. Riverside Park, an infamous cruising spot in Memphis. I question why this park is so popular amongst queer men. This also leads me to question more about queer identity, how Black queer people were navigating risk and hooking up during the lockdown. I interviewed queer sexual culture experts about their cities, the pandemic, and the work they do. These interviews took place in Memphis, Chicago, and Atlanta between January 2021 and 2022. They start the weekend after the unofficial Black Gay Atlanta holiday, Martin Luther King Jr. weekend in 2021, and conclude during my trip to Atlanta for MLK Jr. Day in 2022. These are the Covid Chronicles. In the early 1960s, work would begin on I-55, which would isolate Riverside Park from the larger metropolitan Memphis area, which was growing more increasingly Black. The 1960s was the age of desegregation and white flight, which meant many white folks were fleeing further east to suburban areas like Poplar and Walnut Grove. The name of Riverside Park was changed to Martin Luther King Riverside Park in 1968. On April 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated while visiting Memphis to assist in the sanitation workers' strike. Across the country, parks, expressways, and schools were named after King as white America attempted to absolve itself of King's murder. America attempted to rewrite itself as progressive and in line with King's legacy when just months and years before they saw him as public enemy number one. On today's episode of the Covid Chronicles, I discuss Chicago with Gender and Sexuality Center Director Mycall Riley. The path to freedom from New Orleans through Mississippi and Memphis to Chicago, Detroit, and on to Canada is well documented. Chicago was a destination for free-thinking Black folks during the Great Migration. Ida B. Wells' forced migration comes to mind. Chicago's Boys Town is still a destination for Black queer folks escaping the Bible Belt of Memphis. This interview was filmed in Chicago in March 2021. However, in our attempt to talk about the queer scene in Chicago, the conversation evolved into a conversation about Mycall's home state of Minnesota, trade, the politics of passing, queer representations in the media, and the Black church.
In this weird, post, I don't say post, but like we're in the middle of pose, we're in the middle of
we are literally watching Pose.
Right. We're literally in the middle of it, but like generally in the world, right? We're in this weird...
Well, we at the end of Pose now in the world.
We are.
And there's the two.
There it is. But like, I think that there's such a... Currency is more than Instagram. I think a really good way for us to focus on that is like when I think about like the Black queer folks who get traction, right? I think across racial spaces often. On Instagram.
Right.
Or out in the clubs, right? It's oftentimes someone who is cis presenting, they are masculine of center. It just deepens the ways that I think patriarchy has us in a headlock in such a deep way. Look at even that, like, especially when we look at the queer people who get press and play, it's in markers of, those folks have a lot of markers of masculinity. There's so many Black, go ahead.
And I was just going to add, just for men and trans people, it's the people that reify.
Mm-hmm. That right. Can get right, who aren't dismantling, questioning, shaking up. If you can keep it together, there's so much pressure, there's so much structure.
No character on Pose complicates the binary.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone is either a woman or a man.
Mm-hmm. And because that's what we want, you know what I mean? Because if we did anything different, like that's scary for us, for the world. I don't think for me per se, but it might be for me. I don't know, but like it's scary for all of us.
But I think there are layers, though.
Yeah.
Because both on one level, I would say none of the characters on Pose trouble the binary, but also us knowing that they're trans does. you know.
Poses a unique spot for it because of like how much of the show is like, look at all this trans representation.
And both are true.
Mm-hmm.
Both, these are trans representations that trouble the binary, but also both a lot of India is non-gender, non-binary,
yeah.
But at the same time,
well, India's non-binary, but I don't think the character identifies as non-binary.
The character's not non-binary, and if we were to be real, even most representations of India, even on her Instagram, lean towards the feminine, and it's still a pretty type of androgyny.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like it leans more androgyny. You know, that's the complicated thing about non-binary identities and how they're supposed to, like, what they're supposed to look for. Because I don't think we don't know what someone who is non-binary, like, the structure we live in is so rooted in the binary that it typically, like, just reifies itself over and over and over and again. All the markers we have, like, no, I'm being non-binary, is like, but are you? Like, we're gonna read it as masculine or feminine anyway. We being society as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely, I love and think it's great that India continually challenges folks to remember that they're non-binary and is like, use they the pronouns for me, and like, I love that. I think that's beautiful. And also, like, when we look at their Instagram, when we look at like them in different ads and things, like, it's, face done, even if they have no hair, like lips, what they're wearing.
Because I would say their ads and their Instagram are slightly different too. Because the ads are what the industry wants.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, my bad.
No, you're good. So yeah, I think when I think about how deep patriarchy goes in like Black queer spaces, I also think about it like, which I'm not trying to center whiteness, but I'm thinking about the ways, who are the first men that I think white gays try to engage with, or what does the Black person who's friends with all of the white gays generally, this is a broad generalization, look like? Oftentimes it's a pretty masculine looking Black guy, sometimes with a good haircut, other times not.
And I would say I fully agree, and I'll cut it even down the middle. Let's do this.
Let's do what? Let's hear it.
Let's break it all the way down. The Black dude that hangs with, because we can even put it in the girlfriend scenario.
Mm-hmm.
The Black dude that hangs with the 4 white dudes is one or two things. Either he's the big butt buff brute with the dick that's hanging down. Mm-hmm. This could even be seen in the show Fire Island on Logo, that like everyone's white, but the Black dude is this tall, buffer dude that's far more attractive than everyone on the show because he has to be. Mm-hmm. On the flip side, it's a Black version of the same thing.
Absolutely.
And most often what I see, like, because I went to Fire Island this past summer, and then two summers before that, I want to say.
Okay.
And it was the whitest Asianist place I've ever been. Mm-hmm. And that was while I was living in Boston. But most of the Black people that I saw, and I would even break it down even similar to this, were either chocolate or biracial. Mm. And either chocolate or biracial, the type that doesn't even make eye contact with other Black people. You know what I'm talking about. And so that was kind of the vibe there. And we were the only group that had what I would say African American cultural people.
Sure.
Because like we were in a diverse group of like nudists or whatever, but even the Black folks in the group took our all Black picture. That time, how we do.
We're here, but like we're here.
Right.
We'll get it there when we get there. Maybe we won't.
And so it was obvious that they ran counter to Fire Island, but I would say it doesn't run counter to the other island that's there. I forget what it's called. It's like Fire Pines and then something else.
I thought Fire Island was one thing and the Pines were another thing.
Okay, so it's Fire Island Pines.
Oh, it is. See, I haven't been.
And there's this other island that is more diverse and more like lesbian populated. That I've never stayed on, but I've partied on.
Okay.
And that I was like, bitch, I need to be over here. And not just because it was, because even though it was more women, and this kind of connects back to what we were talking about. Yes, Lord. Shit, I've always gotten along better with lesbians than I've gotten along with even gay men.
Quiet as a scat.
Quiet as a scat, you know what I'm saying? Shit, you know, if it weren't for lesbians, I wouldn't have any friends.
Yeah.
I'm just keeping it real, black lesbian, you know, a good stud, you know,
Right.
good AG. But okay, now I want to come back to
You're not wrong.
So I want to talk about the Chicago scene. Because one of the things that I've asked every one of my participants is, what is the sex scene like?
The sex scene or like the party scene? Or both?
I don't understand your question, but I understood my question to you.
Okay. The scene. I mean...
Because remember, these are how you defined it.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm like, I don't understand what you're asking me.
Sure. Jeez, the scene.
Because we were talking a little bit earlier about a little something.
What, about Steamworks? No, about Jackhammer.
Well,
about all of
what are we talking? What are we talking about?
Those are all like.
What is the right? Okay, so can I refrain?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So, I'm a young, frisky, vivacious. Well, I'm not sure if I can even dwell on young as much anymore. But I'm, you know, frisky, vivacious, you know, tight booty bottom that is in Chicago for the night. What would I do in order to make sure that I got what I needed tonight?
What would you do? I mean, so they're in Chicago. So it's interesting. Depends on where, like, what part of Chicago you're in, first off.
Well, I'm in West Pilsen.
You're in West Pilsen. If you're in West Pilsen...
A place that you've lived.
I have. I've lived a little more east, but yeah.
Now you lived east. he practically lived in this fucking apartment earlier, but now...
It's like a mile or so. No, but Pilsen changes a lot. Like, the more west we get, the less gentrified it gets, which is interesting.
How did the destruction of the Chicago projects affect the sex scene? I'm playing.
I'm sure it did. Okay, because there's no... If we're gonna get it is, but if you want to think about like what you would do if you were in West Pilsen, you have two options. You probably, like most people when they come to Chicago, would go north, right, to the like gay part of Chicago, Boys Town, all that.
Remember, I ran into you there with my cousins. That random
with Dolan.
One of the things that Trey gets at is this dismantling of spaces. In our culture, we oftentimes understand gay spaces as gay spaces, straight spaces as straight spaces. For instance, the last time that me and you saw each other was in the neighborhood of
Boys
Town in Chicago, a space that is understood as queer, so it would make sense that we would see each other there. But one of the things that trade complications sexual orientation is this understanding spaces as 100% gay or 100% straight.
Absolutely.
Can you say anything to that? Like, as someone, and let me also add spaces including church. There's a space that is understood as straight. Even school, academia is a space.
Absolutely. I think I've never thought about trade as like destabilizing straight or queer spaces. I think it's a really, really good, really astute. I mean, the whole idea of trade, right? The whole idea of not the whole idea, but a part of it can be the ways that they, move through a lot of spaces. I think kind of in a gay way, but like
in a queer way.
In a very queer way.
Can we pause real quick to talk about queer?
Sure.
Because I want to define it in a very absolute way for this conversation.
Sure.
Can we look at queer really as different and gay as that same sex shit?
Sure.
Like, so queer is anything odd.
Right. Anything that's,
Just for the purpose of this conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, so the trade moves through spaces in a very queer way. They have a way, I think, and this is, it's really simple, right? So it's like, often when trade manifests, right, in the, like, gay space, if there's, like, a bunch of tradie men who show up into a space, everyone gets super excited about said trade. Like they truly like look, here we have this masculine thing, this more mask thing, this more masked men here, like hear ye, like the whole energy, literally the space will change. I'm sure we've seen it so many times at like a gay space when a bunch of trade come in there, then all of a sudden like the whole energy just is like everything's focused on them, everyone's trying to be near them, everyone's excited about them. It's just a completely different.
And what I like about what you're getting at is that, and I don't feel like I always have to speak back to the norm, but your taste, your interests are different from this. But I think it is necessary to acknowledge this as a truth.
Absolutely.
Because let me also validate, I have, because my politics, I have put it like this, I have a confrontational politics. So I'm always coming straight from bitch, attacking the truth as wrong, this type of thing. But I can't not acknowledge that I've been in several spaces that I've seen this same phenomenon happen, even if at the time I ain't want to acknowledge it. Because it didn't fit with my caramel latte fantasy.
What caramel latte?
That's my riff off of Valentina's French vanilla fantasy. It's my caramel macchiato fantasy.
I'm dead. Yeah. Even if it's not my thing, right? Sometimes I wonder, and I want to be clear. Sometimes I wonder, is it not my thing because I'm so removed from it because I can't do it, or is it actually not my thing? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, is it actually not my thing because I've not decolonized? That's gross. But like I've done the work to like move past the ways that like.
And doing the work does have an effect.
But it's still like I'm not gonna front that like it's not gonna catch me a little bit too. You know what I mean? And depending on the day, maybe I'd be like more intrigued. I'm typically not, mostly because like I don't think like I usually feel like trade is usually like it's a lot to get to them if you don't know them.
For me, the thing that rubs me the wrong way about trade as a sexual thing, and this is going to lead to a more sexual conversation that I want to have, is that one of the tenets of trade, at least as I've been able to put it together and even understand for myself, is the aloofness of it. That it's this dude that is straight who theoretically, for this context, has never thought about being gay. In reality, has engaged in plenty of gay shit.
Right.
But for the context of you, because keep in mind, you're the first one to get it.
Right.
Part of what makes this great is that this dude typically is not gay, and you as a gay man are finally getting the dick that no other nigga could get. And
new dick,
fresh dick.
Right.
And so coming back to you.
Yes.
So the last thing that we talked about is currency, whether we thought like trade or masculinity had any traction in the gay community. Your response was basically the affirmative. And your response was definitely the response that if someone asked me, I would say. Now, one thing that I've also heard from participants is a flat out no. Like, for instance, I talked to someone that I went to college with when I was doing the research for my dissertation, and he was like, no, not really. And I looked at him like he was crazy because I'm like, nigga, you also are in a fraternity from our university, and like, so you gonna tell me that being in the closet or being yada yada. And so he didn't really give me much back in response to that. But one of the things that did come up is his friend did try to complicate this whole top and bottom thing, and he would even stress that, well, I'm not really into masculine guys, I'm into like butch queens, And one of the biggest arguments that I get from verse guys about verse is that, or guys that operate as tops and bottoms, is that we're not tops, we're not bottoms, we're gay men.
Right.
Can you speak to any of that? So we're both thinking about masculinity, but we're also thinking about tops and bottoms, and how trade is read onto those things.
Right.
And I'm not sure trade are bottoms.
Right. So, a couple thoughts. I think that statement of like, we're not tops, we're not bottoms, I'm a gay man type of thing, I typically think that's usually just like someone who hasn't done, because I typically hear it, someone saying they're a gay man is when they're a bottom. I haven't heard a ton of people who do the penetrating say that. Because I think we live in such a we whittle things down so simply that like if you are then being penetrated by default, you're more feminine because that is similar to how someone would have sex with someone with a vagina.
Right.
And so by default, like those are people, and because we live in this patriarchal,
heteronormative,
hegemonic kind of structure. People who are inherently.
And pause. I'm gonna start treating you like my students and tell you not to use those words.
Okay.
And just talk.
Okay. I mean, to be fit, sure.
Mm-hmm. To be fair, I want you to finish it so I can flip you up.
No, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I want you to get real Minnesota.
I'm so sick of you. Not real Minnesota, yike.
Why is that a yike?
Just Minnesota is just funny to me.
Here's the thing.
What's the thing?
But I think that's even part of this too.
Mm-hmm.
Because keep in mind, I'm dealing with the same thing. Or with moving back to Memphis, my hometown or whatever. But, every time I hear Minnesota, I think of Prince.
Have I told you the Prince stories?
No, but we can get to that later on in the interview. Like, make sure we talk about it before it's over.
Right.
But I think the thing about Prince in this context is just how someone so funky could come from a place that's understood as so white.
Right.
What do you think about that?
I think that someone is
and queer, someone so black and queer.
Yeah, I think that Minnesota's a lot blacker and a lot queerer than I think. Unless you've actually like tapped into it, and because the whiteness is so big W white, it's so everywhere. It's like in the snow. It's in all the Scandinavian 7 foot tall Svengard, Nikolai, whatever. Like all those people are there. I think they just like take up a lot of the space. So I think that it just gets lost in it, but it's there, and I think it actually like hardens and is like becomes really intensified. There's all these like little unique moments where like queerness and blackness like do quite a bit there. There's a ton of black churches there, right? Mm-hmm. Which is hella gay, hella queer all the time.
How so, Michael?
How so is the church gay?
Specifically a Minnesota church. Maybe even one not so unlike the one you grew up in.
Maybe not. Well, first of all, right, if we break it down to like the queer people who were in that church, particularly the generation that I'm a part of, there's at least of like the dozen or so young people who are making up the youth ministry. One is trans. At least 3 of us are like out, like, with partners, like out with like, on Facebook, like, at Pride.
Like out. And that's why, and if we can pause real quick. Mm-hmm. Yes, outness is complicated. Yes, outness is different for everyone.
And also sometimes it's not.
Because I got to make this announcement for the listeners.
Okay.
But we not going to all sit up in here and act like we don't know what out is.
Absolutely. We definitely, yeah.
And that's what you're getting at. That not that out is a nose ring. Not that out is pride, but out is out.
But out is out. And those things are there. And so, like face stamped, like lip gloss on. There's too many of them. So the reason why I think it's important to point to church, there's just so many of them there. Enough that my mom and I, like, when we fight about queer shit still, she's like, it's because they're like, she's like, the reason why there's so many gay, y'all, there was a demon, there was a spirit that got, and I'm like, all of us? I'm like, all of us. That many? That is a busy spirit, man. Like, that is busy. Like,
and I'm going to tell you the truth. The reason the spirit, because one, me and you both grew up in church. Mm-hmm. What denomination?
I'm Kojic.
Okay, you Kojic, I'm Baptist. Now, but keep in mind, I'm from Memphis. And
Memphis that's different.
Thank you. So, keep in mind, we kind of Kojic.
I would consider
Thank you. So, that's Memphis. But what I love about this queering how we understand space. Now, we haven't necessarily queered space as in how we understand city or whatever.
Right.
But what I love is that we were talking about Chicago, but Chicago, even though it's where you live and it's where you enjoy, is somewhat irrelevant to this conversation.
A little bit.
You know.
A little bit.
You know, Minnesota and the church are a little bit more relevant.
Absolutely.
And what I would say, to your theorization of sexuality.
Absolutely. I learned so much about my sexuality super early on about in the church. There's a person who was a very flamboyant choir director at our church. There we were, our church had these very steep steps. You're fine with these very, very steep steps. And we were we would jump off of have these pillars, things next to it, and you would jump down, and it was kind of high, but I'm not really that kind of girl, but I was jumping around like that at that point, and I was jumping around, and our church was very much so Kojic. I didn't have a person who wasn't someone from church come to my home until I was in the middle of 7th grade. Only people I knew were church. It was very much like a family.
I would believe that, and I don't think that's as queer as it comes across.
Right. It's not so much that, but I just mean how close we were. The church. We were
Because I'm thinking black folks, other than family and church, who else? Ain't nobody from work come together. Nobody else ain't come to your house.
That's true. Yeah. I guess it's not that strange. But it was strange because we lived in the suburb we've been living in the suburbs for some time at this point. So I have gone to other people's homes a ton, but I myself never had anyone return the favor. My parents would let me not sleep over at these other people's house.
Oh, you mean your friends?
Yes.
Oh, okay, I get what you mean.
I never had my white friends. I never had anyone who wasn't a black person from church come inside my house.
Well, that's a little different too, child. That's a little different too.
It is.
Your parents are from the South too, right?
My mom is from Mississippi, Memphis, Chicago. My dad is from Minnesota.
I'm sorry, you got a Southern black mama.
I do.
They ain't for white folks just coming up through their house. I'm sorry, we lived through too much. You ain't gonna have Britney Spears on that wall. No Britney, this is one place.
Britney coming in the door.
This is one place where whiteness and white femininity will not be pedestals. And we breaking down pedestals.
We are. You can't see it, but
with snakes.
So I was jumping off and down from this church thing, right? And my mom was doing something. Again, it takes a village, right? So this way, it wasn't uncommon for someone else to be like, hey, stop doing that thing. You know what I mean? It was very common for that. Even if you didn't like them, it was very common, which I don't love, but sure. So, Melvin, his name, I was jumping off and on, and Melvin was like, stop that. You know you're not supposed to be jumping off of that, this and that, right? To be fair, it was a little high. Should not be jumping off of that. It wasn't, what they were reprimanding me for wasn't something I shouldn't have not been doing. Not unlike many of the weird times when someone else from my church one time saw that I was reading Harry Potter and tried to reprimand me.
That witchcraft?
Yeah.
Girl, child, that's the false idols.
Right, literally, very that. So
and anyway, she transphobic anyway.
She is transphobic. So anywho,
this turned into a show.
I was jumping up and down, right? Melvin stopped me and was like, you know better than that. Stop that. And I remember being like, shut your mouth, Melvina, and switched his name to feminize it. And I remember people thinking it was hilarious. All these other grown ass men he jumped. I think it was super funny. And again, our community, right, very conservative, very hierarchical, very ageist. So me making fun of an adult is not an okay thing. That's not
especially at that time. This is the 90s.
This was 94, 95. This was not something that was I don't know how usually if you did something like that, you would get spanked right at church, not maybe in front of them, maybe not.
And again, black church and Kojic in particular has Southern roots.
Deeply Southern.
So
you don't play that.
Just not a thing.
And I remember doing it, feeling emboldened in my spirit to do it. And I remember watching these people laugh about it. So then Melvin like got my dad, because my dad, in theory, everyone thought my dad was like the like heavy hitter. And in some ways he was. My mom was actually the heavy hitter, if we're gonna be like serious about it.
How it went down.
But like, so he went and got my dad, not my mom. He went and got my dad and explained what, like, told him what happened. And I remember my dad reprimanding me, but laughing. I remember being like, don't, like, almost kind of being like, we know, but like, we don't do that. It was this very, and I remember this like at 5 and being like so I also even knew that I was queer at that point and knew that if I knocked this person, that'll be better for me.
You knew that's where I was.
Right, I knew what that eye look was for, but I did it knowing that I would.
And we've all been there and we all did it too.
Yeah, but I really wish I could apologize to them about it. No? Well.
No. Because it gets back at this reality that our queerness isn't ours to protect or to hold. And kids do what kids do. Kids see.
I had to pick it up from somewhere. I'm smart. I don't know if I was smart enough to, like, maybe I was to, like...
Now, don't get twisted. It ain't a nice moment by any stretch of imagination, but also at the same time, I don't believe in guilting kids about kid shit because I feel like God speaks through kids in some vessel ways. They tell truths in ways that they don't even know they tell them. And for all you know, you also have to go back to that child, little Mycall, and wonder why he was upset with him.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder how Melvin approached you.
I wonder.
I wonder what Melvin had said before that exchange. Because it's not Melvin's queerness that got him gagged.
Right.
It was y'all's relationship.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I wish I knew.
Because if we were talking about you as an adult, then maybe I can argue that you have political motives in order to tear this man down because you want to be deacon.
Right.
But a 5-year-old doesn't have motives. 5-year-olds just comment on what they see.
Right.
And snap back. And 5-year-olds also have gay uncles that they don't say things like that to. Because they like them.
Exactly.
You know.
Yep. I mean, Melvin's a messy. I have a bunch. It's not my story to tell, but I have a bunch of. I've learned as I've gone on a bunch of messy Melvin stories. So.
I'm sure, because Melvin is at every black church.
Several of them.
And
that's the gag where I sometimes get annoyed with my mom and we fight about this. She's like, it has to be something because there's too many of y'all right here. I'm like, or like turn to this person, that person, them lesbians in the choir. Like, there's a bunch of people.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that kind of trade anyone who people, like, regardless if we know they're queer or not, like, the air of mystery around their, like, do they or don't they, that's never been something that I've ever had access to. And I'm okay with that. I don't think I want it. Sometimes it's cute to look at. But, like, the idea of me actually engaging with anyone who's like that.
I think the question is the core of trade. If I had to define the difference between down low and trade, down low is the person who is gay but is trying to hide it. But trade to me covers a big area. Like we're talking about Venn diagrams. I think trade covers down low. I think trade covers first time.
People who are maybe like pan, like queer.
Yes.
I think folks who are just like really fucking sexual, like people who are just like
masculine presenting gay people. Accidentally straight presenting gay people. I think all of that falls.
Folks who I think haven't figured out
questioning,
but not so much question. People who were raised in a very tight spot and didn't realize they could do other things.
How do we engage with? And I think it's more of a rhetorical question, but how do we engage with people who identify as straight but end up coming to terms with and identifying themselves as gay? What type of... And the truth of the matter is, within heteronormative language, we don't have language for that. Within black queer language, we do. And that's what
we've always had that. We've always had... There's always been people... We can point to... our grand aunts and all the people who like, you know, had a bunch of kids, but also their best friend has lived with them for forever.
Right. And even something like phrases like, you know, his little friend.
Mm-hmm.
Either how we use little or friend, you know, or even little things like the little hand thing. You know how he a little.
Mm-hmm.
We've always had a language for articulating these things, and that's why when Black people participate in this type of how do I want to say, ideology that suggests that queerness is something new or an invention or a modern phenomenon produced from white civilization, it really is not only like wrong, factually wrong, but it is indoctrinated into a specific politics that they don't realize is white supremacist. That's what gets me.
Right.
Is that in an effort to save blackness or even to save black men, you indoctrinate yourself to the white man's stereotype of the brute as the norm.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the effects of white supremacy. It wouldn't be such a big deal. It wouldn't be such a controlling factor if it didn't function and at least make sense on a problematic level.
That part. You better go off.
In the final episode of the COVID Chronicles, I talked to Andre Fields, a voting rights advocate, about his work, Atlanta, the demise of Black queer spaces, and fraternity.